Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. I'm so excited to be here today. We are live in the Keep Recording Studios in Denver. I have a longtime friend in the house, Laura Mahony. Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila.
Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. This
So
is
excited.
15 years in the making.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. I'm so excited to unpack this conversation because Laura's been in my life for a long time, and we've talked about a lot of fitness where we initially met, and then the journey of we've kind of transitioned through like different career spaces, different agendas, and somehow I think we are both right on time and right on purpose. So we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I read a little bio. I don't always do that, but I want to read her personal bio and then her company Lux Neuro's bio. And this is just like the quick 10,000 foot view because, we're going to unpack all of it. And then we'll go from there. Okay?
Yep.
All right. The Laura Mahoney LPC BCN, mental health therapist and board certified neurofeedback clinician. Laura is a dedicated professional with a remarkable journey as a mental health therapist and neurofeedback clinician. Her personal transformation from struggling with anxiety and depression to finding genuine happiness and purpose underscores her empathetic approach to guiding others through their challenges. So that's Laura, and we're going to talk about Laura the human, of course, because we always care about the humans behind the mission before the mission. But this is the mission, Lux Neuro, which is amazing. Lux Neuro is headquartered in Denver, but serving nationwide, specializes in neurofeedback and counseling, catalyzing personal growth. Their mission, unleashing potential via confidential, evidence-based care, melding conscious and subconscious with transformative results. Guided by values of quality, empathy, trust, transparency, and perpetual learning, Lux Neuro envisions a future where everyone embraces their capabilities to the fullest. Woo! Yeah. Is that exciting or what?
Sounds good. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really amazing to hear it read back and what we do. And so thank you.
It's wild. Yes.
Yeah.
I can't wait to unpack it because, again, we've literally been having these conversations for years of like, what's next? And now it's here. So I think this will be a really inspiring conversation for anyone that feels like you're in it or you feel called to do something and maybe you don't know how to take the next step or you're not sure what you want to do as a thing, if that makes sense. Like it hasn't even become a thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's real for both of us. There was no podcasting when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Although I did record myself on a cassette tape, so that was the beginning of the beginning. But before we get into the business now, tell us about young Laura.
Tell about what?
Tell us about like your young self. Like
my
Laura
young
as
self.
a kiddo.
Oh, goodness. My mom used to call me Chatty Cathy.
Perfect. Okay.
So, I was youngest of six kids. I had 5 older brothers, born and raised in Indiana. And I was just a creative from the get and a giant feeler, empath, and, just kind of always doing things and talking all the time, but then sometimes not and things like that. So
What were other people and your other kids in your family or either parent like super talkative?
my dad was probably the most talkative.
Were they empaths?
No.
No? Okay. No. What about the brothers?
Yes, I have a couple of brothers that I would call definitely empaths. It's really interesting because it's like, sometimes I just felt like, I don't know if my family knows this, but I felt like an alien to some extent,
Yeah.
They're conservative, I'm liberal, and I just remember being in my little self thinking like, I didn't understand some of the concepts of all the things that, growing up in Indiana didn't make sense to me. And it felt like I was this little old soul in a little body. And I didn't think of it that way, but it was kind of strange, in that way. But love. I mean, so many laughs, so much fun, too, with everybody. But yeah, my mom was probably an introvert. She loved psychology, but then she had this ginormous amount of kids to raise, and My dad was a executive at an insurance company, and he was pretty gregarious, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Were anyone in the family intuitive besides you?
Maybe one.
Okay. Number one, I want to say anyone that's listening to this, because family is always hard. I don't care who you are. No one walks away unscathed. Even if you're adopted or whatever the scenario is, it finds a way. But feeling like an alien every Olson family Christmas, that's me, where I'm like, and my family kind of all act the same. We have similar beliefs, not the same, but like, I look at them and I'm like, there's no way. Like, I'm for sure adopted, and I mean that in the best way. And they probably say that about me, so it's all love.
Yeah.
But I think everyone can relate to that, like looking at the fam and being like, oh man, all right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. One of our first card readings, I remember you telling me, because you're the youngest you have 5 older brothers.
Correct.
And I'm the oldest of 4. I have 3 younger brothers.
Yeah.
So we're like yin and yang.
Yeah.
And I think that really does position you for what you're going to do in life. And I remember one of our first readings, I was like, yeah, I have 3 younger brothers. I don't know if you knew or not, because this was many years ago. And I'm like, and it's a lot, it's a lot of dudes. And she's like, yeah. You were like, yeah, I think that's part of your journey of like what you're going to do. And I'm like, I'm exhausted now, so whatever it is I'm going to do. And then fast forward, it really was, with things around like women's liberation and women in sports and like kind of being this feminine voice amongst like all these dudes. I don't know how I was the oldest, so I was like the biggest, thank God. How did you do it as being the only girl and the littlest and the smallest? And
yeah, I think that's how I became like a pretty big personality. And I'm like, just and I have a boy sense of humor and things like that. You had to be like, here's me, things like that. So, it was, I think that I just had to, I think that's part of why I am who I am, because, I remember there was one time when they all went out to dinner. We were going out to dinner, and then I was so small, like I was really teeny. And then I had to go to the bathroom, and I left, and then I came back, and the car was gone. And because it was just like the lost in the shuffle type thing, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think that just has made me a bigger personality and things like that. And I had to be, fight to be seen, and I wasn't going to be a shrinking violet, I don't think.
I love that. Do you think that's applicable to the journey right now?
Yeah. It's always been something that's been in me. It's weird because sometimes it's like, was I born with this? I do feel like I was born with that in me. And it's been interesting to have that feel like it was dimmed at different times, and it was still in me, and it just and I couldn't ignore it, can't ignore it. And yeah, it kind of comes and goes. Mm-hmm. What I realized recently is that, I let some other factors in my life take away my bigness or my power.
Yeah. And
so I became a smaller person, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not who I am. And I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of having people say things about me. And I'm like, I'm this bright light. And if you want to see that, awesome. And if you don't, then you're going to fall away. But I think part of my confidence has come through this path that I'm on right now. Like, I see this light that's ahead of me, and I do not veer from it. It's always in my mind's eye. And if I start to go off of it, it's become my true north.
Okay.
And if I become, kind of off of it, it gets me right back on. And it filters through everything. So it's like, who I maybe associate with or whatever I do, I'm always looking at that light. And so it becomes bigger than myself. It's not about me. It's about what I'm here to do. And then that allows me to be the big person again. And Brene Brown talks about like getting in the arena and,
Yeah. Well,
don't throw stones if you're not in the arena. So now
Theodore Roosevelt said it first.
Yes, and she does give him credit for that. Yes,
and I changed it to the human in the arena instead of the man in the arena. So
yeah.
But anyways, I'm not going to shed on their light because we're here for that.
Yeah.
To preface this conversation, a couple meetings ago, Laura and I were talking, and she's like, I wasn't born for this. I was built for this. And I was like, oh, whenever we podcast, again, I think it's probably been a year. Yeah. Like, that's going to be the undertone. Yeah. And I think going back to like our young selves, the more I've been thinking about it recently, I'm like, oh, damn. Like, I had this trajectory. We're winning, an NCAA championship for lacrosse, and then we're going to win the CrossFit games and blah, blah, blah. And looking back, I'm like, oh man, those are none of the lessons. None of that was kind of like the end game to what was next. So you're a young child. Tell me about like middle school, high school, that experience, because this was before we didn't grow up with social media. We didn't grow up with anything around mental health, or at least I didn't. And it was, I mean, middle school is the worst for everyone. That's kind of like feeling like an alien with your family. I think these are like universal truths.
Right.
And high school is kind of a situation, but do you feel like those were formative years where you were finding your path, or like what was your journey in those, like that middle area?
Yeah, that's interesting. At that point, like, I think I was just like, I was just having fun through life. But at the same time, I was really struggling a lot. And I think a lot of my life, and this, it's one of the places where that got me to where I am now, because there was this disconnect between knowing who I was on the inside and feeling like it wasn't seen. Mm-hmm. So I know now that, through, mapping my brain and things like that, that I'm neurodivergent. When I use that means ADD, autism spectrum, highly sensitive person, emotional, like highly emotional, sensitive, and things like that. And so the world felt really harsh to me as an empath, but yet it felt really fun. So it was really hard because I would get dysregulated so easily, and I needed to retreat from the world, but then I needed to be in the world and I needed to retreat. And then, and then eventually, like, there was underlying anxiety and depression, and that I didn't really realize. And I think one of so when you told me that I was going to talk about myself, I was thinking about the Queens on RuPaul. I don't know if do you watch that?
I don't watch it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
I just love drag queens.
Okay. RuPaul's house, not to interrupt you, was like in People or something. It's all disco balls. I was like, this is my dream house.
I know.
But carry on. Yeah.
There's so many things I love about all of that culture.
Yes.
But, so anyway, they have the eras. And so I was like, this is my ADD era, and so I have several poignant eras in my life. And so this is at that point. And I think one of the tough things was I had a passion for learning. I just loved it. And I loved school, and I just had these little points where I was like, something didn't make sense. And it was weird because I would be like, I would test it. Like, I was two grade levels ahead in like English and math for most of my childhood. And then I would test and, really highly gifted and things like that. And then I was always with the people at the top of this small private school. And then in middle school, the wheels just came off, and I tested in this reading comprehension thing. And it was like I went to the bottom. And then all of a sudden, it was like the stigma came in, and it's like you're in a different class where you're in the class where they don't read as well. Yeah. And then people, call that the Crayola class or whatever. And then it's like, it's just hard knowing that you're really smart and you want to learn, and then going, why am I passing out asleep when I'm trying to read? Why can my friends read and I can't? Yeah. Like, I could read, but it was exhausting, and I was tired all the time. And there weren't any answers, because this was back in the 70s. There just weren't answers then. Right. And so then you start having, talk about thoughts create your reality. You have other people start telling you who you are. You are the person who fits into this box. You are the person who fits into that box. But I'm like, I do not fit in that box, and here I am. Mm-hmm. And not that it's I'm not judging other people or anything, but I just knew myself. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that was really tough for me, because I think that I felt judged by various people, like some parents, and then the same people get all the awards. And, in hindsight, like, I wasn't sitting there. Like, I had tons of friends. I had tons of fun. Don't get me wrong. This is not a boohoo story at all.
Yeah.
But it does get into your subconscious, and it does impact who you think you are. And you do start getting stuck, and you do start minimizing yourself, and you do start playing small, because those are the people that succeed. I am not one of those people. Mm-hmm. And you just learn that. And it's not true. Mm-hmm. It's not true at all. And you can probably tell I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, thank God that was kind of the path, because that's like the kindle that started the larger fire.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I feel like if you didn't feel that, like that, I mean, I think about stories in my mind. I'm speaking next week, and talking about like the inner fire, the pull thing, because it's not really something you can like tangibly talk about, but there's always been something there that's like, I don't feel seen, or this, I know I'm this, but I know I'm seen as something else.
Right.
And when I look back, it's those experiences when I was like, oh, I remember being at the table and my grandfather was like, oh, you know, I'm like, well, I'll play professional sports. And he's like, oh no, women don't do that. And to this day, I think about that moment. I'm like, okay, like I can sit there and literally just feel that fire and like that rage where I'm like, and I'm so glad it happened because like before workouts.
And then comes the CrossFit Games.
Yeah, I was going to say. No, I'll think, or even before like I go speak or a podcast, like I'll sit there and like I'll think about that and I'll be like, that's the fucking why. Like that is why we're doing. And there's 1,000 of those little moments. Like, and again, this is years ago.
Yeah.
I'm just always fascinated when we talk about the hard parts. There was no tools then. Like there was nothing that kind of wove through and you just kind of get by. At what point, so after middle school and high school, when did you kind of have this awakening of like, I want to challenge some of these beliefs or thought processes? Like maybe my story isn't what I think it is, or I'm not what people are telling me.
I think that it has just been a gnawing. It's a knowing. Mm-hmm. It has always been in my stomach and my body. And it's like if there was a pit, a really dark hole, it's like there's just deep down in there, there's something that's like, you're more.
Yeah.
And it's like, or this knowing that like, you know, and you were part of this because you were in on that, the beginning part of it. I was like, I would say it's my yellow brick road. Like, I said for years that people who have that in you, like it can take years and sometimes it doesn't. Cause like once I hit a point, it's like a rocket went off, but to get to that rocket, it took a little bit of time. And so it was like, but I just kept saying cause I go to mediums or psychics or card readings or whatever. And I do my own card readings. And I was just like, I feel there's something big in me.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And then they always would be like, it is big. You are supposed to do big things. And I'm like, but what is it? And it's like, nobody ever told me it was going to be a neurofeedback and counseling clinic and you're going to change, you know, hundreds of lives, thousands of lives to who knows. Because there's that ripple effect. Once you optimize one person, then it's ripple, ripple, ripple. And it's like, there's no way I could have known that. And it's like my life changed overnight. And part of it has been neurofeedbacking myself and optimizing my brain. And part of it has just been my spirituality and following the signs of spirit. So I would be like, I was on this brick. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to do that brick. And one of the bricks was like a podcast with Emily Schramm doing card readings. And then the next brick that lit up was you. And I did a podcast with you and I learned about neurofeedback in that. And then it's like it was like, boom, I don't want to do this. I don't want to sit here anxious and depressed all the time. I think I should be doing something else. Yeah. And then boom, this thought was like, why don't you be a counselor, a therapist? Okay. And I was like, okay. So then I just signed up and did that. And then it was like, and then neurofeedback came in and then, but I just kept on following the signs I was given. And as each brick would light up, I would step on it. And it has been magical and I can't even believe where I am and I can't believe where I'm going. So, you know,
boom.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there, but it really is awesome. I want to speak to the people because I feel like this is what I was coming to many of the times was I feel it. I know it's there. I know there's something bigger and I don't know how to take that first step or I don't know how to listen from what's within. I feel like I've even asked you this recently and you're like, just listen. What's
do it.
I know it's card reading 400. Like, let's go. You already know this fucking message. But what do you think is like the easiest sounding advice of like, I can feel it. I know I'm there, but what is the next step? Do you think it's just blindly just taking the step and just showing up?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of do too.
Sometimes it's like, and this is where it gets into this really, you know, I part of it is I got there before neurofeedback and part of it's I got there after neurofeedback.
Okay.
And what I realize is that like, you know, it's hard to see those next steps, those next opportunities when you're dissociated, when you're depressed, when you're crying in your bed, when you're like so anxious you're going to go out of your skin and you're hyper focusing. Like all I can see is through this little straw, all I can see is this. I can't see what's around me. So how am I, and then what's more is like when you're in constant anxiety, depression, how are you going to feel your intuition? You can't. And then when it's like, and then when you have your head versus your body's like, I'm anxious. And you can even be, your head goes, no, you're not. Why are you anxious about? You know that person has nothing against you or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I'm anxious. And so, this gets into kind of my last era that, do you want me to tell you that now?
Yeah, sure.
'Cause it kind of relates, but so it's like, I got to the point where I had my soulmate husband. So I had manifested all the things. Soulmate husband, he popped in. I had house I wanted, that popped in. 3 amazing kids, and friends, community. I'm strong. I was crushing it at CrossFit, and I was anxious and depressed. So I'd go out in the world and I'd be like, hey, everybody. Yeah. Laura. And then I'd go home and I would wake up every day teary. Oh. And I would wake up and I'd be like, and Eckhart Tolle has this pain body. Okay. He says, and he's like, and I was delivering my pain bodies and I'm like crying on the floor, going, that just guttural, like crying. And it's like funny now, but at the time it's just like, I was just like, just get whatever this grossness is in me.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
Get out. And cause it was like, I was like, I don't know how I can live like this. And the light was, I can't leave my kids. I'm not going to do that to anybody else. And I don't know how to, I literally didn't know how I was going to get through it. So I felt suicidal. I felt very anxious despite having everything. And that tells you shit's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, we can talk about intuition and we can talk about all of that, but it's like, how do you do that when you're feeling anxious and depressed all the time? So you walk in and you might have this great opportunity. Well, if you're anxious or depressed, probably the energy isn't going to vibe. You're not going to be your best self. Plus your head knows you shouldn't be anxious. You shouldn't be depressed. And it starts judging your physiology. Your physiology goes, well, fuck you. Yeah. I'm anxious and depressed. And then there's this battle within you. So how are you going to trust your gut when you go into something? How are you going to have an intuition? Because there's no contrast. It's all anxiety and depression. But once you get that mitigated, so we can do that neurofeedback, we can calm down the physiology. Then it's like, man, I feel good. I feel like I'm alert, calm, focused, hitting on all cylinders. Now I have something that I can do something with, because emotions are information. So anxiety is your information, like you need to do something. That discomfort is what affects change in people's lives. So you want to have discomfort. We don't want to not have discomfort. We don't want to have it, but we don't like it. But that moves us towards our goal. Because I was depressed, because I was anxious, I moved towards becoming a counselor, and I got shit figured out. And I also had some talks with spirit. I'm like, this is in me. I'm supposed to be helping people. I cannot do this while I'm anxious and depressed, and I'm having stuff happen with my kids and their, challenges with impulsivity and things like that in the school system. And that's a whole other conversation. But then they kept bringing the resources, and then more bricks lit up. So
it's just so wild, because you do have to take a long time to get from A to B without a lot of tools. It's almost like you just got to power through, which is the worst thing. But if the tools aren't there, but then they come kind of right on time. So I would always say to people, if you're in the thick of it, it's not staying in the thick of it, but it's almost like having the faith that the right thing will come if you have some awareness or that you don't like it, or that this isn't correct. Because I think so many people are stuck in it without these tools or accessibility to these tools or these conversations. That's why I love podcasting, because at minimum you can have exposure to the conversation, and then you can kind of seek things out.
Right.
But a lot of this isn't really well known or talked about things. People are just living unhappy.
Right.
And I really feel like that step one is being I'm unhappy. Something's not right.
Right.
And then I think that's when you even see the brick road. Before, I don't even know there's a brick road at all.
Yeah. And what is that unhappiness telling me?
Right.
Something's not right. When you're depressed, that's against yourself. There's something I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
That I'm not doing.
Yeah. I see a lot of people, and I think this is probably the generation above us, and I might be stereotyping this, but that's just the way things are. And that's just it. I don't I don't know that everybody believes it can get better. As horrible as that sounds, I think a lot of people think like, again, the old school narrative is this is it. This is as good as it gets, or this is what it is type attitude. Do you get a lot of that now? Or do you get people that kind of see through that?
What I would say is that I don't know if I get that, but what I can say is that's totally false.
Yeah.
I've seen people at all, like in our clinic, we work with people in all ages.
Yeah.
And I think that's bullshit. It's like you can create anything at any age, and you can do anything at any age. It's like Colonel Sanders, I think.
Yeah.
That then, and I do see incredible change. Like there was this person and they are above, let's say 60, 65.
Okay.
And they went from, dysregulated and, they didn't have the boundaries and just all the things. And I don't even know that there was awareness that they weren't as on track as they might have thought. They were just like, oh, let's just look under the hood for fun. And then they found that really there was so much that you could get done. And one of them was like, they were drinking more than they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And that comes from impulsivity and compulsivity. It's in the front of the brain. And I'm like, I can explain that to you. You have impulsivity and compulsivity in the front of your brain, and it's like a cyborg. Your brain is locking onto something, it's locking onto alcohol. And so we trained that area. We had trained her. We got all the things down that, we wanted to mitigate for her and improve. And then she's like, I want this part. And so we started training her, and she was like, I went to a party and somebody gave me a glass of Prosecco and I had one sip and I just put it down. I just didn't want it.
Okay.
And it's like things just melt away once you deal with the physiology of the body. It's not like if you do a top-down approach, it's like, let's really try to not drink. And it fails over and over and over again because it's not a problem of what you're thinking. You have the cognition, you have the skills, you just can't access it. Mm-hmm. And so we get that down. And then, so that's an example of somebody who's changed, and at a later stage of life. Yeah. And they're living a really great life right now because they feel alert, calm, focused, and they're doing in their life and they have clarity, and they have mental flexibility, which, sometimes we lose as we age. So,
yeah. Well, the good thing about aging is hopefully your perspective widens and you experience new things. So maybe you start seeking a better way later on because you weren't really questioning things. Or maybe your life, high school, college, kids, get married, like it kind of goes boom, boom, boom. Like a lot of people don't check in until it slows down. And it's like, oh shit, I just retired. I don't know if I like this life. And it's like, well, shit. But life is short. Life is also long. I think people get caught up in like, oh, I'm already this age. I can't do this. But I want to pivot a little just because I want to get into neurofeedback so people know what we're talking about specifically.
Okay.
But the reason you are so magical, and I think way before you were in neurofeedback, and I was like, I think you should do this, was because neurofeedback is a very particular thing, and we'll talk about that. But as a longtime athlete, health and wellness enthusiast here for Tequila, obviously, a little bit of balance in there. Sometimes not a little.
Balance.
Ish. The joke is in the balance. But that when you're in these industries, you're seeking out a better way. It's really, really hard to find the right practitioners. Like you said, when you go into your brain, you start peeking things. My rule in life is never get an MRI. Like long time knee stuff, like we're a hard athlete. Once you start digging, you're going to find something. Yeah. And the key with that is having the right team. You need the right practitioner that trusts you, that you can trust, that they have your best interests. And when it's your knee or ACL, I certainly don't know the anatomy like a doctor or anything else, but I've run enough laps where I know if I don't trust a doctor, it's not going to be a fit. With your brain and some of this therapy, mental health, even just couch therapy, nutritional stuff, you still have to ask the right questions because they're going in a space like you can't see. You can't pop under the hood. You just have to trust someone's doing the right thing, and not even just doing the right thing for you. Right. So Laura has such a competitive edge because she's got the science, she loves the school, she's got, the degrees. You've got the lived life experience. So you lived it, you have empathy, a lot of it. And you've got the intuition. Yeah. So it's a triple punch, if you will, of finding the right practitioner. And as an athlete and constantly being, I'm not going to say injured or anything, but always seeking to optimize my own health and do human optimization as work, I know how to bob and weave to the right people. And this is why I'm excited about this conversation, is because you are one of the few that's actually right. And it's not even a topical, my knee, my elbow, whatever. This is your brain. This is your whole life, like the most important organ, the only one you can't have transplanted. Like it's a very, very big deal. And finding the right people is really, really hard. So tell us a little bit about neurofeedback and why you know this is so what you're built or designed to do.
Right. Yeah, I think it goes back to my passion for it. I know what it's like to be on the other side of things that is not so pretty. And I know what it's like to be optimized on the other side. And I know that when I was going through it, we would talk, like you and I would talk about it, like there were no fucking answers. And I was like, I researched, that the beauty of a ADHD or an ADD brain is that hyper focusing. So I researched the shit out of all of it. And I was like rabbit holing all over the place. So it's like, I just didn't, so I had some of the answers and I was like, okay, so it's physiology and, but how do you get at that? So I meditated for an hour and a half a day and I visualized and I did, so I was doing some of the Joe Dispenza work. So he might've gotten me to you and things like that because I was visualizing, but it's like,
it's more the key piece of like having your journey, even in neurofeedback specifically, was a windy one.
Right.
How do you know you are so much different than the practitioners and the other places you've experienced? Like this is on for you. Like if you ask me how I feel like I know I'm supposed to be here podcasting, and not even to compare myself to other podcasters, I know that I'm supposed to be here because all the things I've experienced, like the way I've been built to be in this seat right at this moment. And there's a plethora of stories. That's what I want to know about you. Like, how do you know you're so different than everyone else? And like, this is where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think because of, I'm told over again and again that it's heart. Yeah. Like I have so much heart. Like I have always seen the light in people.
Yeah.
I've had some challenges with various people in my life that I've been close to, and they have had very adverse life experiences with addiction and other things. And it's like when you see that, and I remember, I would always think I know who that person is. I knew who I was. And, I see those kids at school who are like misbehaving and I'm like, they're in fight or flight. It's their physiology. Something is threatening them. They are not in their frontal lobes because you get them out of that threatening situation, which might be a teacher on a walkie-talkie. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to get in trouble. And it's like, you get them out of that situation and then they'll tell you exactly how to act. They know how to do it. They just can't access it because they're being thrown off. And I was impulsive. My kids have been impulsive. And so I used to get lots of phone calls at school and I would be like, this is what's going on. And they just couldn't, either there's too many kids or they didn't understand or whatever it was. I had advocates that please help me. And nobody could help me. So I was like, fuck that shit. I'm going to figure it out. And it was part me being me and part things coming in from spirit. And so neurofeedback plopped in and I was like, people do not deserve to be treated like shit because they're dysregulated. I know it's really easy. I'm guilty of it. It's like, oh man, that's annoying,
Yeah.
But it's like, I believe that we have the ability to live our best lives. And so, I am driven to the nth degree by that concept that I believe in the light in people. There's the Phineas Gage story where he gets the spike through the head and he turns from one personality to an unpleasant personality. You see it in head injuries, like people that have personality changes because it's getting in their temporal lobe. And it's like, it is the same person. I am the same person that I was now, even though I've had life experience, as I was when I was dysregulated, and I didn't have the ability to necessarily read facial expressions to be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that right now, have no filter. Yeah. But it's like, now I have a little bit more of a break and things like that because of the neurofeedback process. But it just, your brain touches so many different places in a life. Even if you were just to fix the ability to be present, that can change so many lives because through presence is awareness. Through awareness is like, I should do this, I shouldn't do that. I'm going to respond versus react. And I'm going to be present for my kids. And they're going to have a secure attachment, which makes people very resilient throughout their lives. So if we can get some of these things, if we can get to parents, moms, dads, caregivers, teachers, whoever, whomever, it's you can affect positive change, because when you can be regulated and present, it's like, I can perspective take now.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the magical pieces of neurofeedback.
I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, the heart piece is so, and I knew you weren't going to be like, well, I've got 20 degrees in this, so I know I feel good about being here, because none of my guests go on to like that. It's really just like, it's the soul piece outside of all the ethos that come through the experience. Like that is it. But I think it's always like here and then here.
Yeah.
Tell us like specifically, if you're listening and you've never heard about neurofeedback, how do you explain what neurofeedback is? And even if like maybe a little bit of the history, just so people know like where it came from.
Sure. So the history is it's been around for decades, and it was found, don't quote me on the exact history, but basically it was Barry Sturman, and he found this SMR rhythm in cats, and it's a sensory motor rhythm. So when a cat is looking at its prey, it becomes very physically still, emotionally still. If the cat's like all like wackadoodle, it's not getting the bird, right? So it has to be emotionally calm and physically calm and very focused. That is what I was talking about, that presence. We can train that up in our brain, and it's healing and stabilizing. So they found that it was really effective with epilepsy, and then subsequent years, it's effective with ADD and ADHD. There's studies that say if you administer neurofeedback to a population with ADD, ADHD, and then you also have another population with medication, they both are equally effective. However, when you take away the medication, the symptoms of the inattention and ADD and ADHD come back. But when you remove the neurofeedback, if they've had enough treatment, the symptoms don't come back. So the brain has learned to not be distracted or whatever. And that'll be a future conversation, because that's a huge subject. So basically, it's been around for decades, and I think that it hasn't really, it was being done by these passionate pockets of clinicians. And so it's not something that has been funded for large scale studies. And so that was something that hindered the progress for quite some time. And now it's becoming, more well-known. Bessel van der Kolk, who coined PTSD, and he wrote The Body Keeps the Score. He said he promotes neurofeedback for developmental trauma and PTSD symptoms, as well as psychedelics. And so now it's gaining more traction. More people are recognizing it as such, like as a really effective treatment. So the way that it works and the way that I explain it to people is basically we have being brainwaves and doing brainwaves. The being brainwaves are going to be basically idling the brain or shutting it down, because if you think about the cars on a highway, we don't work on the highway when there's tons of cars on it. We do it when there's less cars on it. So the brain does the same thing. So when we go to sleep, it starts slowing down, less energy, less brain waves, and that's going to allow the person to be internally focused. They're going to this is in an ideal brain. They're going to shut the world out. They're not going to hear the sounds in the other rooms. They're going to go into a deeper sleep where they lose their body, and then they lose their mind, and they don't even exist into unconsciousness. And then it's like pushing the button on a computer. Then it powers back up. Then you get more conscious, and those idling brain waves turn into, you open your eyes, then you're externally focused. Now I'm in the world. And those are the doing brain waves. So when you are waking up, it's like, oh, okay, now I need to do. I'm either going to go throughout my day. I'm going to have more energy at times when I need to maybe give a speech, do things at work, maybe work out, maybe fight or flee. So there's all levels of doing. And then that's when the computer, so to speak, is fully on and processing things. And then it goes back down. So we can tell where the brain is overproducing or underproducing brain waves, or normative. We can compare the brain waves to a normative database. We measure the brain in 19 different areas around the head.
And that's the brain mapping.
Correct. So that's through a brain mapping. And so let's say that when you're waking up and you're kind of like, oh, I'm tired and groggy, and you're kind of aware that you exist, but kind of not. That's a theta brainwave state. That's a very slow brainwave state. You are not going to want to have that brainwave going on in your frontal lobe across the front of your head when you're sitting at school trying to learn something. If you do, you're going to be somebody with inattentive type ADD who's barely keeping their eyes open, who's daydreaming, and dreaming, that's when we dream as well. And they're not going to want to do math. They're not going to want to do, their English or whatever it is, and things like that. And it's slowness of thought. They can't take the information as well, or they get distracted. So that would be an example of we have these brain waves, we have all of them, but the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong power is going to cause a problem. Conversely, let's say we have a brain that has in the back of the brain, it has anxiety, like literal fight, flight, or freeze. In the back of the head. In the back of the head is where all your senses are, all 5 senses. We need that to shut down and idle in order for us to not have a body, to not hear the things in the other room. So those people who have beta and high beta, which is a doing brainwave in the back of the brain, that's going to be a hypervigilant brain. And sometimes that's inherited and sometimes it's learned. So let's say that you had an abuser and you were going to sleep as a kid and you didn't know if that abuser was going to come in at night. Your brain is not going to shut off. It's going to stay on kind of like high alert and it's going to wake up easily. And that follows that person through their life. And so when you don't sleep, then you're going to have anxiety, depression, reactivity, anger outbursts, you name it. It just runs the gamut. So that's in a nutshell, what we're looking for. And then we create the story of the brain where we correlate all the symptoms of overprotection, underprotection, location of the brain, and we correlate it. So I don't even have to know what is your experience, and I can tell you if you're depressed, anxious, OCD, perfectionistic, can't sleep, maybe neurodivergent, learning challenges. We can see a myriad of
everything,
many things in the brain, and it's amazing. If you see it, you can treat it.
It's wild. So what is exactly the process? Like talk about the brain map, like, because when I walked in, I've done, I think 2 brain maps at this point at least, and then 52 sessions. I didn't know. And I was very fortunate. I've always said in my life, something bigger was looking out, which we all have, because all of these like human optimization things that I essentially needed, I never cared. I was never looking for myself. It was coming through because of work opportunities. Right. So like I'd get a client that was really good at fascial stretching, and then I needed that. And then this forward thinking like knee surgery, I was like, oh, I need that too. And then like, therapy and neurofeedback came, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need all this. And these were clients, but I was really like do it for work, but it was putting on me on this path to like ask these larger questions. And of course, there are key pieces in the game and key pieces to the humans around me. And it was bringing like really varsity people around me for the most part. But I had to learn about it just by like trial and error and then jumping in. And so when I was doing it, I was like, this is wild. So like literally you walk in and do the brain map. They give you a cap, and I'm assuming it's still the same, but you do like the gel on your head and you're literally on there and it's picking up brain waves.
Right.
And so you do the brain map and then you do the actual neurofeedback. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure. So the neurofeedback process is, we're measuring the brain once again in 19 different areas. So one of the great things about neurofeedback is that we can be targeted about our treatment, whereas medication is global on the brain. I can say, we only need to treat this one spot because this is where social anxiety is, or this is where PTSD is, or we do several spots. So we have this paste. We put an electrode on the head. There's no input into the brain, and it's reading your brain waves in real time. And then we have an amplifier, and it runs it through, and it will give the person feedback through auditory feedback. Sometimes it's auditory, sometimes tactile, and sometimes it is visual. So the brain is moving up and down in power all the time. It's kind of like the old sound systems, if any of you know about that. And so like, let's say your anxiety brainwave is going up and down, and let's say it's hitting at 20 and you're in power. I can set it for 10, let's say microvolts, which is a unit of power. It goes down below 10, and then the brain hears a feedback noise. It might be a ping, a ding, a gong, or some other noise. And then every time it goes down there for a period of time, it will give you a feedback. Ding, ding, ding. The brain goes, oh, I did something. That was cool. Okay. And the brain likes it. It seems not intuitive because when you hear it, you're like, this seems really silly.
I'm like, what am I paying for here?
Admittedly, it works. And so the brain does. And it's just like when you go to Vegas and you hear those noises that you're like, oh, I hear noises. The brain loves it. And it can do that. And it's a passive learning. So it can do that in the background while you're focusing on something else. So then it learns to not create so much that high amplitude or high power of anxiety. So that correlates to less anxiety, potentially better sleep, less distractibility if it's coming from that type of thing, or less sensory issues like loud chewing, things like that. You can also inhibit, it's called an inhibit. You can also reduce slowing brainwaves, the idling. So we can reduce the doing brainwaves and we can reduce the being brainwaves. And then we can bring up the brainwaves of presence. Okay. So we can either reward or inhibit, and that's the basis of how it is. It's an auditory type thing where the brain learns.
It's just so fascinating because I had never seen it. It's kind of an intimidating situation if you've never done it and you're like, this is my brain. Like, I don't know a lot about this. And again, this is in a time when I existed in these human optimization spaces and we're having this high level conversation and blah, blah, blah. And CrossFitters, we know paleo and nutrition. It's like, and I don't know anything about brain and concussion. I was a coach for 10 years. That was always a big deal, coaching at Grandview where we had lost a kid at one point because of an undiagnosed concussion. Like, so there's all these conversations, sports, physical, sleep, that was kind of coming back to like people medicating and not finding the answers. And when I found neurofeedback, I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is the conversation piece that's been missing forever. Like, if we could, I do think there's a place for medication always in traditional therapy and whatnot.
For sure.
But man, if we could navigate around a lot of that just doing neurofeedback,
right,
that's amazing. PTSD is in my family, and so it's a newer conversation, and I think even the process of it is a little bit intimidating, putting on the cap and then like someone looking at your brain. All the more reason you've got to find the right people doing the right thing, because it's a lot of trust.
Right.
You don't know really what the practitioner's doing. Even if I'm an educated consumer, a conscious consumer, and I'm asking the right questions, there's still a massive amount of trust in the practitioner.
I totally agree. That's one of the reasons why psychoeducation is paramount. Like, I have had neurofeedback where I didn't really understand what they were doing and things like that. I had a kind of a iffy result, and so it drives me to be as competent as possible, mentor with the best mentors, because it right now is a mentorship. You can't get your degree in it and things like that, but it's like I am studying it, and psychoeducation is so important. So when we do our brain maps, we spend an hour with the person. I always tell them it's like, here's your skeleton. We're going to keep putting the meat on it. And every session we spend time telling them, this is where your brain is idling. This is how it's correlating with your symptoms. We're going to train this down. And when we train that down, I expect you to have maybe a clear windshield effect where you feel alert, calm, focused. You might feel like you put glasses on. You might feel like you're sleeping better. You might feel whatever. And so I will tell them what I'm expecting, and then they may or may not experience that. And then they come back, and when they experience it, they're like, oh yeah. And then people start becoming more self-aware of their physiology. Am I anxious? Am I depressed? Am I and some people are numb when they come in. They can't even feel their feelings. And that's legit too. And so then they start feeling their feelings, and their feelings start coming on. And that's a game changer. So they really learn about themselves. They learn about what neurofeedback does, and it's great. I love it. Once people are acclimated, they're like, "Will you fix this?" They're like, "I was irritated this week," and they're like, and they expect me to fix it, and I'm like, "Okay." And then I look at the protocols and I look what we're doing, and then I change things, and then that really builds a trust in that process, because I'm able to say, "This is what we're doing. This is what I expect," and it happens. Or their brain gets off track. So it's like going to the gym. If you do too many leg days, too much time in one spot, sometimes the brain goes, that's irritating. And sometimes it doesn't. So if it's irritated, then we do something else. Or sometimes I have to switch bands. It's getting a little in the weeds, but basically we make changes. But I think that our clinic, I say it's an art, because it's a balance between when do I do counseling, when do I do neurofeedback, and when do I do both? And we really believe in the combination of that. Some people have their own therapists and they keep with their own therapist, and that's fine. But the brain has this beautiful innate intelligence where sometimes people who have PTSD, sometimes they'll have content come up into consciousness. And I never know. I know the area that I'm going into, but the brain will be like, here's a memory. And they serve it up on a little platter. And if that happens, then we dig in. I say we dip our toe in the pool, but we don't have to do that deep dive of really like nailing the trauma and talking about it, because most people have already done that. I know I did for decades. I talked about it. It was still there, still jacking me up. So that's where the art is we know when to like hold space. And sometimes we do more time in counseling. Our sessions are an hour, and within it, there's flexibility. So sometimes it's like, nope, feeling great, just plug me up and let's go. And that's what we do.
Okay.
And then sometimes it's really like, man, I have this thing coming up. So we really, but in the beginning, it's psychoeducation intense for that reason, because we believe so much. And I'm not messing around. I am training your brain. I am optimizing your brain. I'm getting rid of things. You need to understand what I am doing. And we are very transparent, and this is how the process works. And then people start to understand it, instead of it being some kind of voodoo or something like, I don't know, this seems hokey to me, because it really, really works. But once you have somebody who is anxious and hypervigilant, like looking around, like some people who have PTSD can't have their backs to the door, and you get rid of that. Or you work with somebody who's, a shooting victim, or had been involved in a shooting. They hear a sound, they duck and cover. That impairs your life, and we're able to get rid of that by doing neurofeedback, and that goes away, and then you're hooked. And it's like, because that affects your whole life, that you don't have to,
live like that,
work around like the 4th of July.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What is like the biggest, you kind of alluded to this, but who are like the people you think that you can help the most? Neurodivergent, PTSD, ADD, ADHD, like, is there any other group other this is really applicable for? Like, it's a really solid answer if it's a fit.
Poor sleep. So some people really don't have mental health challenges. They're like, I just can't sleep. And so we work with people who can't sleep. A lot of moms can identify with the second your baby's born, you hear like, and you're like, what's that? And you wake up, and then dad's sleeping. And so they have that hypervigilant brain, so they don't get the deep sleep. So I would say sleep. I think those are the big hitters: sleep, PTSD, anxiety, depression. I think you hit all of them. Neurodivergence, learning challenges. Kids do great because their brains. Everybody's brain is plastic, which means it can change. But man, kids just because they don't have the talking brainwaves yet, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so talking can be difficult because you don't, like in my son, it didn't do anything. But then when we did talk therapy, and then it just kind of makes you feel different. And not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm not bashing that whatsoever, because I know there's things that you need to work through. But sometimes when it's a physiology thing, their brains just change so fast, and then they can access the counseling, because there definitely are, like, the counseling is a huge piece of it. But neurofeedback and counseling can go so well together. And like I said, we work with tons of therapists, and they do the therapy, we do the neurofeedback, we do both in our clinic. So it's just whatever is the best fit for the client.
Yeah.
So
it makes so much sense, because I initially got into it. Well, again, it was client, but I did it for sports performance and sleep. But mostly it was just like being able to be more focused. I can't even remember, because actually competing wise, or even with podcasting, like I can like totally get in a zone, and like everything clears, and it's like all right here. I can't remember. I was probably sleeping something else, and I was just not happy at the place I was training, and that's a whole other podcast. But it was like my goals were nothing around like mental health, or I didn't have that conversation. It was more just sports performance based. But I love this because just like sports performance, you need your massage person, you need your nutritionist, you need your Oli coach, you need your cardio coach. Like, you need these tools and this team to approach things. So I love that you guys have this dual approach alongside traditional counseling therapy, and then also the science side of actual hardwired feedback, where you can, approach these at all angles. And then, while it sounds so out of the box, you look at other things in life, like training for CrossFit or whatever, you always have a team. Like, that makes sense that you have a crew or a couple people to bounce stuff off of.
Yeah.
So it's more normalized than you think.
Yeah.
What's like the biggest success story that you've worked with thus far? I know there's a lot at this point.
Yeah. I had one person who had a significant trauma history, neurodivergent, and they were having what's called a pseudoseizure from the trauma. So it's basically where the brain gets locked and they get frozen. So they weren't able to drive. They weren't able to live on their own. And and then there's some other significant factors in that patient. And then we trained them. We did an intensive where we agoraphobia also. So what's
that?
Agoraphobia is where you can't go. Like it was hard for them to go outside of the house.
Okay.
So we did we have intensives for some of our patients where we train them every day. Okay. And so this person came into the clinic every day, and we were able to. I think after a week they were able to go to the mall, and then after they were done. They had greatly reduced anxiety, depression. They were dissociating, and they weren't dissociating anymore. They didn't have any more seizures. I believe that they're driving and living on their own now.
Wow.
And they had a lot of emotional outbursts. And the emotional outbursts subsided quite a bit. We can see those types of things in the morphology of the brainwaves, things like that. So that was somebody... that was amazing. And then to work with, and my favorite was just this little story of them that they said that, and this goes along with some of the language barriers with neurodivergent people, that it's pretty invisible. So they were like, people used to tell me that my favorite color was orange, and it's not. And I wasn't able to tell them that. I would just be like, yeah, my favorite color is orange. And they said, now I can tell you that it's sage green and periwinkle blue. And and then they started to articulate that in the past. They would just get so frustrated, and that would cause emotional outbursts because they couldn't communicate what was their experience. And then it's hard because you're always like you are, and you don't know any different. And so that came online. So that was a pretty dramatic one, but
that's wild.
I love my job.
Yeah.
Come and see us wherever the camera is.
Yeah, all the cameras.
I know, I'm like, there they all are. But it's amazing. It's like, yeah, and I had to find out for myself. Like even though I had seen some results in my family, I was like, I need to know more about this. So that was another reason why I dove in. And then I worked as an intern at South Metro Fire and Rescue. And I literally saw every single person get better, and I understood why. And once that happened, I was like, done, mic drop. This is what I'm doing because it works. And I don't get burnout because I celebrate. Like I just graduated somebody yesterday. We graduate people regularly. So, it takes 40 to 55 sessions for a complete result. But once you're done, you're done. We get people off of medications. We get people sleeping. I got a whole family sleeping. None of them have slept. And I work a lot with a lot of college kids now, and they're taking mental health breaks, and I'm getting them optimized, and they're back at school and they're doing great. And I hear reports back, and it's just as heartful. And then imagine yourself without anxiety, imagine yourself without depression, imagine yourself responding instead of reacting is probably the biggest one. Your self-esteem goes up. You get more opportunities. You know how to navigate your life better. You have your own answers. You don't have to go running off to everybody else for answers or trying to do all these things all the time. You can use your mental energy to go from surviving your life to creating it. And then that creates the biggest thing we talk about. It's like creating a ripple effect in the world. So it's like my pain became everybody's gain. And so now I'm affecting change in a lot of lives. And then each person I optimize is able to be like a great parent, a great wife, a great sister, brother, human. I mean, even just smiling at the grocery store. Yeah.
Yeah. Game changer. It's so wild. I'm such a believer in it, obviously, but it's amen. And dude, good job explaining neurofeedback. I just want to drive this home the most of your path to this point has been such a wild, turn of events. So I want people out there, because my passion piece is people finding their path and finding that purpose. And it's never a straight line. It's never what we think it's going to be. And somehow, if you're just open-minded enough, which I've seen you, I don't even know how many times for card readings where I'm pretty non-plan-ish, but I'll be like, Laura, what? We got to do a reading. I don't know what's next. Things are coming in, but I don't know. And I'm faithful that I know it's there, but I can't see it. It's just this faith of showing up. And I think you're just such a perfect example of trials, tribulations. I love my pain can be your gain, going through it. And then now like you're in this place of like such a responsibility, but so powerful and so much potential for positive change.
Yeah, thanks.
It's wild.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah.
It is wild. It's like, and what I want to say is you can change your life at any point. Mm-hmm. You're never too old. You're not too young. Like you can do anything you want.
I was literally just getting, what do you want to tell the world? And I feel like that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can change it. That would probably be it. Or optimize. Like it's just imagine what, like, I know what it's like to be like, I was stuck for almost 20 years or 30 years. I was stuck and I was successful, but I was stuck. And it's like, I am doing things that I actually couldn't even dream what I'm doing now. And it's just the people that I work with, just, they're amazing. And everybody like if you can get, like everybody has the capacity, they just can't access it. And then I just see people optimize and it's like people who judge these people, it pisses me off. It's like, they don't want to be like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, and then I see them get this new lease on life. We see the cool thing is when you get rid of that static from neurofeedback, they just start doing things like these things come into their lives. That's something that this whole other podcast I'm going to, and maybe not with you, but like I want to, or maybe with you, but like I want to explain it because we do see miracles happen once people get into the present moment.
Yeah.
Man, magic happens, like moving out of basements, getting out of bad relationships or stopping addiction or whatever. It's like you just show up as your authentic self that you know that you are and you feel good about it. Yeah. It's just life-changing. It's amazing and it's miraculous. So.
Amen. Yeah. I mean, well, everything is energy. I'm here for the science and everything. Mm-hmm. But like at the end of the day, like you shift something, you shift everything.
Totally.
And so, well, I mean, we can go, the woo is my favorite part. I love the science.
I know.
But I'm here for the angels and, the Madonna horses with the big blowouts.
I know.
My favorite cards. Give us just a quick tell us, because we'll have you back. We'll get into the minutia of this because there's so many conversations around this. I just want this, I want, again, the human behind the mission to be explained so people know the deep ethos of your why and how your heart truly bleeds this. And this is like what you're supposed to be doing. And if it's enough for you to be curious to reach out, but what are some of the other things we're going to talk about down the road that are a little bit more in the weeds? Like just give us like the titles of them.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about ADD and ADHD because it is it's medicated a lot and sometimes it's not the appropriate medication, things like that. There's a lot of root causes of those. So I would love to do a whole thing on that. Mm-hmm. I would love to talk about sleep, anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Because I feel like all of these things really flow through most of our lives and things like that. So
yes. Yeah.
What
I'm particularly passionate about are men and women of service and then brain injuries, obviously with athletics, but a lot with coming back from overseas and those things. If someone is interested and this sounds familiar, either personally or someone close to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
We have our website, that's probably old school to say that. But anyway,
okay, we're cool.
luxneuro.com. There's no E in Lux. It's Lux means light in Latin. So basically that's how we got our name. So luxneuro.com. And there's we do free consultations if you think that this might be a fit for you. They're about 20 minutes and you can get that on the website. My contact information is on the website as well as my co-founder, Haviland Lodge.
Boom. Yeah. I'm so excited. I hope if you're interested, you at minimum go ask questions.
Yeah.
And ask good questions. I hope we've provided some good questions to ask, whether it's you go see Laura or somebody else.
Yeah.
Make sure you're always asking the right questions. Is there any other piece of advice if someone's seeking this and maybe they're in a different state or whatever? I know you guys service nationwide, but maybe they're working with someone in this arena already. Is there anything you suggested they should do before they start the process? That's probably a huge question.
Yeah. I'm trying to think because it's there are books on it, like A Symphony of the Brain.
Okay.
It was hard for us to field a lot of questions about it in different, because a lot of our clients are like, I want this for my my people in another state. So we now have a remote neurofeedback division where we actually can ship neurofeedback equipment to other people in other states. So we did that. But I would say really one of the biggest things is finding that good therapeutic relationship, making sure that you feel comfortable with the person, warm, because the therapeutic relationship can get you really far. I also think that they need to be looking, have the ability to look at the raw data, the brain waves themselves, and then an industry standard would be NeuroGuide and or WIN-EEG. I think WIN-EEG, I know these are technical terms, but they can write them down, tells you a lot more information. If somebody's just using NeuroGuide, you can't see all of the information in that. Our clinic uses all three. We look at the brain waves, the raw data. We are also looking at it in NeuroGuide as well as WIN-EEG in our clinic. So those are places to start.
Okay, I think that's awesome information because again, it's hard to ask the right questions when you really have no idea.
Right.
For me, my thing is any practitioner, even hair salon, whatever. If you trust your gut, if you have something that feels off or if it feels good, lean in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a short end. We could go on as we normally do, but I just have to say a personal thank you. You've been a bright light in my life since CrossFit so many years ago.
Samesies.
We've done umpteen card readings and energy sessions, and I just broke up, or I'm going to do this. And you've been just such a good human.
We've lived a lot of life.
Dude, we have. We might be vampires. Don't tell anyone. And it's like, the sun's going to come out.
Don't ask our age.
Yeah, we're going to turn it into something totally different.
That's a bad hair flip, but whatever.
www.
I know, right?
It's perfect. But I'm just so proud of you. It's so amazing. And the best part is, homie, you are just getting started.
Thanks.
We're at the beginning. So
we are.
Yeah. So go check out Laura. This is a special human in our world doing big things. And if you have any questions about this, please go research it. Hit them up. I know
Give us a call.
Yeah, they're more than open to helping and just doing the right thing. So these are your humans.
Yeah, I love connecting with those consults and hearing people's stories and how we can help them. And I want to meet all of you. If you think this resonates with you in a little bit, love to hear from you because neurofeedback is the shit. It's the only thing that has been the nail in the coffin for me, my family, and a lot of people I work with and things like that. So would love to connect with anybody who wants to.
Boom. This is the last question. I almost forgot to ask it. And this will wrap up. What is success to you?
Well, one of my end goals, I'll answer it this way. One of my end goals is to get a nonprofit to circumvent if it's possible, to circumvent the insurance so that I can get neurofeedback to all levels of income, not only low income, but middle income, whatever. If anybody needs it, I want to be able to provide it for them. And it doesn't have to be our clinic, it can be any clinic, but that would be an end goal, to have this ginormous fund of money that I can train an army of people to do neurofeedback, receive neurofeedback, do all the things neurofeedback, and then to work with others and things like that. So that would be success to me, is
I see it.
Change the world like that.
Put it out to the universe. I'm pretty sure God listens to this podcast, so we're good.
Yeah.
Now they know.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you be free. Thank you very much for your time and energy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we'll have more to come. You already know.
Yeah.
Please go check out Laura. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.